Welcome and good morning, and thank you for joining the Iowa One Call Excavation Safety Awareness webinar today, March 21st. My name is Ben Booth. I am with Iowa One Call, and I am also with Ricky Bennett, who's with Iowa One Call. Hello, Rick. How you doing?
Good. How you doing?
Very good. Do you have any information you'd like to provide as a kind of a house cleaning?
Yeah, we have several hundred people in this webinar at the moment, and so I would encourage everyone to hold your questions. There will be a Q&A at the end of this. Also, for any reason there's any technical difficulty and everyone gets logged out, please give it about 5 minutes for us to log back in. Not saying that there will be an issue, but we will try to get back logged in as soon as we can. So.
Thank you, Rick. Our experience with the webinar is that people often had at times had trouble with the volume, hearing from their end. So we recommend you have everything turned up on your end. We have our volume turned up to 100%. And also a recommendation would be to have an Ethernet connection. But if you haven't done that, it may be too late. And unfortunately, we have a lot of people still trying to log in, but we don't want to make everybody wait. We said we'd start at 8 o'clock, so we're going to get through this. We're going to do this live today. It's always a little more polished when we pre-record it, but we're doing a one-off, so hey, there's no safety nets. You're with us, and we're going to get through this together. During today's segment, we're going to cover the legislative amendments to Iowa Code Chapter 480, or the Iowa One Call Law, as it's known, which was enacted last year, July 1st, and talk about the impact of those amendments to Iowa One Call, beginning with the key changes that impacted the center, the revised Iowa One Call board structure, the extended 48-hour period, the extended life of a ticket, or how long you can dig on that notice, the mandatory provision of records to the Iowa Utilities Commission, a new process for locators to notify the center, the Iowa One Call Center, and a new two-way communication process. The revised Iowa One Call board structure includes an additional excavator representative, which that seat has been filled, also an additional locator representative, and that seat has also been filled. The board now includes 2 excavator and 2 locator representatives. The extended 48-hour period now excludes the day of notice. You call in today, that day today is excluded. The 48-hour period begins at 6 a.m. the next business day, excluding Saturdays, Sundays, and legal holidays. We've extended the life of a ticket through the amendments, and that has been extended by 5 days, from 20 to 25 calendar days. And that excludes the 48-hour period. So the 25 calendar days will commence on the day the 48-hour period concludes. With auto-calculated ticket times, there's no need to do the math. Everything's auto-calculated. The 48-hour period is auto-calculated. You can see highlighted. Also, the 25 calendar day ticket life is highlighted. But we'll go through this. Just for your reference, the 48-hour period begins at 6 a.m. the following business day. So this ticket shows the original call date was November 13th of last year. That was a Wednesday. So we know that the 48-hour begins at 6 a.m. the following day, which would be Thursday the 14th. So 48 hours from that point would be Saturday at 6 a.m. However, we know that this process excludes Saturdays, Sundays, and legal holidays. So the 48 hours would come to the next business day, which was the following Monday, the 18th. And the 25 calendar day ticket life begins on that day, the day the 48-hour period concludes. And of course, the expiration date is 25 calendar days from that date. It may sound confusing, but again, everything is auto-calculated. You just need to look at the tickets that are sent to you. There's been a mandatory provision of records assigned via the new amendments so that Upon request, the notification center, that's Iowa One Call, shall provide records to the Iowa Utility Commission, which may be used for investigative purposes. Iowa One Call maintains a comprehensive database of monthly tracking reports, including positive response compliance, monthly ITIC or online ticketing activity, incoming ticket totals, outbound ticket totals, relocate tickets, non-compliant tickets, dig-in tickets to report damage, and information about the dynamic start time processing, as well as emergency notices. This is just some of the data maintained on the public portal and accessible at the Iowa One Call website, which is iowaonecall.com. Additionally, Iowa One Call maintains a complete locate notice repository, and that's where all notices are documented and on file for a period of no less than 6 years. And this information contains the complete ticket history, including caller information, excavator information, the dig site location information provided by the excavator, and all member operators notified, including locate status. Additionally, the information includes the digital map created by the excavator, as well as any added remarks by the excavator. Also, and this is important information that is accessible, the center maintains a time-coded status history. This is a history of the locator's response, or locate status. And this is accessible via the electronic ticket database, which anyone can access online. And when you're there, you can see over here what's highlighted with the red arrow, the status history. If you click on that, you'll be taken to the porthole where you have a time-coded history of all the tickets. And this information includes the date the ticket was created, all of the member operators, that's the utilities that were on that actual notice, and the required status that they all provided. And this is part of the law. This is part of the required electronic positive response. They must report the status to the center within 48 hours. And the default of that is not yet responded. Also, there's a complete log of when the locators responded, the locator response times. A not yet responded status after 48 hours may indicate a failure to locate within the required time period. All this data may be used for investigative purposes, and we make that available to the Iowa Utilities Commission upon their request. There's a new process for locators to notify or report to the center, and the center being the Iowa One Call notification system. And this came through the mandate that states a locator who operates in this state shall correctly notify the center if a location service could not be completed due to a lack of response by the excavator, including the date, time, method of attempted contact, the name of the excavator, and the locator's credentials. A new status code was created for legislative compliance. We had to come up with something at the center to comply with this mandate. And that status code is lack of response by the excavator. Here's an example of a locate notice, a dig ticket, which it contains all the operators contacted with the status codes each operator provided. Here you can see that 2 operators have used the lack of response by excavator. When choosing that status, the locator must by law then provide additional information. And this is part of the mandate that states they must include the name of the excavator contacted, the date and time of communication and how they communicated, the excavator contact information, and the locator's credentials. And note, this cannot be processed without the required fields first having been completed. This is similar in function and requirements to the agreed to marking schedule status process. And this is not a new mandate, but just to review this, if a locator chooses the agreed to marking schedule status, A mutual agreement must exist between both the excavator and the locator, and the locator will then have to, by law, provide additional status information to stand as verification that an agreement was made with an excavator. And that is the excavator's name, the date that the communication occurred, the agreed to date, the excavator's contact number, and the locator credentials. And again, this cannot be processed without the complete information first having been completed by the locator. There's a new two-way communication process. Excuse me. The two-way communication process is a new option for locators, excavators, and operators. Users can send and reply to messaging via the ticket system, and this is designed to improve communication between all users with the system. Ticket Talk, which this two-way communication has been titled, was launched on February 24th of this year. It's an online system that establishes a repository for ticket-related messaging. Messaging occurs via the established online ticket system known as TicketCheck. TicketCheck has been around for a while. TicketCheck is the system that locators and operators use to report their locate status and from which users can access that information. All message content, all message content will be accessible to those submitting and receiving individual locate tickets. Users can access the entire history of any message thread. Unread messages will be highlighted for easy identification. The center will maintain and send copies of any tickets containing messages to all users listed on the ticket. Users can only add content to any message thread. They cannot edit or delete messages. Access to initiate and respond to messages for each ticket will close at the time the ticket expires after the 25 calendar days. The complete message thread will be retained for 7 years and accessible via the online ticket search function. If you're not familiar with that function, that's on the Iowa One Call website. This is a very valuable tool. If you go to the website to search for a ticket, you click on the Search for a Ticket tab, you'll be taken to the search porthole. You can query tickets then via ticket information, the number, the release date, or geographic information. You can use the electronic mapping to do that. Also through dig site information and caller information or excavator information. There will be a 2,500 character maximum limit per individual message. There is no limit to the number of messages that can be added to a message thread. If deemed necessary, the center can disable messaging for individual users, allowing them to view but not reply to messages. Only the most recent message will appear on a ticket when there are multiple messages in a thread. However, an interactive link will be added to all tickets, allowing users to access the entire message thread. A web protocol was created for third-party software integration, and that means this easily allows operators to synchronize their software with the center software. Also, it allows third-party locating contractors with different software to transmit messages on behalf of any underground facility operator. Users can click on an Add Conversation button, which will be on the Add Messages section of a ticket. If the user is not permitted or disabled, the user button will be grayed out. The ticket will feature new and unread conversation alerts. An unread conversation icon will appear to alert the user, and a new message icon will appear next to the corresponding ticket number. Excavators can initiate or add to a conversation via the message conversation window highlighted in yellow. The excavator then, they can select at least one and up to all facility operators to be notified. The message will be visible to all users listed on a ticket, not just those selected. As an example, if an excavator specifically selects separate operators, those operators will be notified of a new message directed to them. But all operators and excavators listed on the notice can view and add messages to the ticket. Locators and operators can also initiate and respond to messages via their message conversation window. They will not have a list of excavators to select from. The excavator that initiated the ticket will automatically receive the notice. Here we have a brief Ticket Talk video tutorial.
Ticket Talk is a new two-way communication tool available to all Iowa One Call System users. This feature allows excavators and locators to communicate with each other by posting text-based messages onto locate request tickets. Here's how it works. After filing a locate request, you can start the conversation by first accessing the relevant ticket in your My Tickets page and clicking the Add Conversation button. Type out the message you wish to send and make sure to tick the checkbox for the utility district or districts you wish to send the message to. Then click Save. A log of your conversation can be viewed in the Conversation History section of the ticket, found just below the Members Notified section. You will need to click the gray plus button to view them. On the other end, locators can view and respond to your messages in a similar fashion by viewing the ticket through their Locator Tickets interface. If a member utility does not use OCC's Locator Ticket Management software to receive and manage tickets, they can contact Iowa One Call to use OCC's web service to receive and send conversation messages. Again, you can view the entire conversation associated with your locate request by viewing the Conversation History section of your ticket. You will also receive an email notification whenever a locator posts a response message to your locate request ticket. The email will list the most recently added message in the Remarks field. To view the entire conversation, you will need to click the corresponding link. Please note that conversation messages may no longer be added to a locate request ticket once the ticket is locked or the ticket's expiration date has passed. Also, the conversation message log is tied to the individual locate request ticket and can be accessed via the My Tickets module or through Search and Status for up to 7 years after the ticket is created. Thanks for watching.
Please note that Ticket Talk does not replace the required notice process and should be used only for supplementing communication and cannot be used to amend, modify, or change the scope of the planned excavation, request a non-response ticket, cancel a notice or ticket, request a relocate, or request a locate of any kind, regular, emergency, joint meet, etc. In order to do any of those things, you would have to go through the normal ticketing process. Again, Ticket Talk is there as a supplement to the communication process, allowing back and forth communication between all users on the ticket, but it does not and cannot replace the required notice process. If used properly, Ticket Talk may be used to coordinate an agreed to marking schedule when both the excavator and the locator or operator have agreed and responded, and the locator has properly statused the ticket through the agreed to marking schedule process. Note, if the excavator does not reply to the message, there can be no agreement, and this would not be time for a locator to use the lack of response by the excavator. That is only for when the original ticket does not contain sufficient information for the locator to complete the locating process within the required 48-hour period. The locator can ask for an extended time for an agreed-to marking schedule, but if the if the excavator does not reply to the message, there is no agreement. Additional amendments to Iowa Code Chapter 480, which occurred on the same bill during the July 1st enactment, also impact operators and excavators. Contact information is now required on all locate flags. Operators must include their name and contact phone number on locate flags. There are new restrictions to the 25-foot rule for underground pipelines. Now, that rule is that no excavation shall be performed within 25 feet of an underground pipeline with stipulations unless a representative of the pipeline is present at the excavation site. Now, those new stipulations are an underground pipeline operating at 150 pounds per square inch or greater, and a pipeline equal to or greater than 2 inches in diameter. The operator of the pipeline must contact the excavator within the required 48-hour period to coordinate the agreed to time. So excavators, it's not incumbent upon you to know that there's a pipeline with those qualifiers. That would be the operator that'll let you know. They'll be notified. They'll know that there's a planned excavation. It's incumbent upon those pipeline operators to contact you excavators within the 48-hour period and coordinate an agreed to meet time. This requirement does not apply if the operator fails to meet at the designated time, and the excavator shall then notify the operator of the failed appearance and excavation may begin. Use of non-destructive methods has been added to the code dealing with potholing. And this is when an excavator is required to pothole, and that is if the operator's opinion states that that must occur, then excavators may use hand digging and now non-destructive methods unless the operator specifies an alternative method. There is now expanded authority for the Iowa Utilities Commission, and that is for the IUC to be authorized to assist the Iowa Attorney General's office by investigating violations of Iowa Code Chapter 480 and by preparing and submitting investigative summaries to the Iowa Attorney General's office. The IUC has also been granted independent authority to receive and investigate complaints in regard to alleged violations involving a locator. The Attorney General's office does have oversight and discretion in enforcing Iowa Code Chapter 480. That has not changed. Required white lining was enacted in 2014, so this is not a new amendment, but it does continue to raise questions, especially about proper execution of electronic white lining. So let's get into that a little bit. This will be helpful. Excavators shall use white paint, white flags, white stakes, or a combination thereof to mark the proposed area of excavation unless one of the following applies. These are the statutory exceptions in the code. When the precise location, direction, size, and length of the proposed excavation area can be clearly and adequately defined and described during the call to the notification center or during an on-site pre-construction meeting. Also, when electronic means of white lining is supported by the notification center and then used by the excavator. Keep in mind, the precise location, direction, size, and length of the proposed excavation must be clearly and adequately defined and described during the white lining process electronically. That's what we'll get into. There is a third statutory exception, and that's when physical pre-marking can be shown to be impractical. However, if that's the case, alternative arrangements must be made, such as a pre-construction meeting, a joint meet, which locators and excavators can schedule on site online through the joint meet process, exchange of plans and blueprints, etc. And for optimizing electronic white lining, we recommend you do the online ticketing and mapping system. And I'll show you how to do that. Most of you probably already do this because we have an 89% usage of the online ticketing system. If you've not used it yet, you do have to establish your username and password. That's a very simple process to get started. Then, if you haven't done this, we recommend first that you go ahead and complete a profile for future ticketing. This is going to save you time when you do future ticketing because you can set up a user profile or job profiles. So once you set up your user profile with your name information, company information, you won't have to do that again on each ticket thereafter. The same thing can be done on jobs. You've got a large job that you're going to have multiple tickets called in for, you can create a job profile. So the first thing you'll do once you've established that is you'll go up to the create a ticket function. You can select from a number of different ticket types, but to create a job, you want to go to the normal ticket. You'll bring up marking instructions. This will walk you through the process. It's very intuitive, very simple. The first thing you'll want to do after reading that is get started, and you'll be taken to the place where you put in the address. In this field, you can use an address, location, or geographic information which goes there. What I've done here for an example is I've used an area in Des Moines, 1800 Grand Avenue in Des Moines, Iowa. If you have GPS coordinates, you can use this function to zoom in via your GPS location coordinates. But most important, if you don't, is to use the zoom mode. So you want to drill down onto your area and get as detailed a view as possible. And you can see this function, how it really shows the detail. Now you can click for your drawing tool and you'll receive multiple mapping tools. For example, you can take the radius excavation, which is allow you to put your spots here in diameter, and then you'll be asked to specify the radius in feet, and you can have other marking instructions to help clarify that with the locator. The same thing could be done with a route tool, and here's a brief example. And again, you would put the width and the length in and following certain instructions. Now, the idea is not to overgrid. This is where locators have problems with excavators' online tickets. This is not electronic white lining. This is overgridded. And if a locator gets something like this, there's a good chance you'll get a status of not marked, inadequate information, and may be requested to go out and physically white line. This is electronic white lining, as is this is electronic white lining. Hopefully that's helpful. Will help you avoid getting those messages with inadequate information. Merely going to the online ticketing system and filling out your ticket electronically does not necessarily provide electronic white lining. You have to go through the details to get that precise information. Let me give you a brief enforcement update. Also on the amendments, there were locating violations put into the amendment. Locator is now defined. Locator was previously not defined, and now locators are subject to the established civil penalties. And there are new civil penalties for locating time violations. For $100 per violation, per day of violation, up to $5,000 per incident. A new locator enforcement authority was also added to the new code requirements, and this establishes locator responsibilities, mandatory compliance, and new penalty provisions. One of these establishments is that the locators have to report when they can no longer or they can't get the locating done within the required 48-hour time period. I've got a brief update from the Iowa Attorney General's office. This is a 5-minute video with Assistant Attorney General Jake Larson.
One-call enforcement is one of the duties assigned to the Attorney General by Iowa's one-call law, Chapter 480. This video is intended to provide updates for recent enforcement actions the Attorney General's office has taken under Chapter 480. In 2024, our office filed 3 enforcement actions against excavators and resolved a long-running investigation into locating violations with 3 large utility operators. The first enforcement action involved a 2024 excavation in Dallas County, where excavations were undertaken to install a foundation for new construction without providing 48 hours notice of the excavation. Because it was new construction, the excavator assumed no underground facilities would be in the area. During the excavation, the defendant hit and severed an electrical line. We filed suit and the excavator paid a civil penalty and agreed to a permanent injunction. The second case involved a 2023 excavation in Lee County using a large excavator to dig a trench on a residential property without providing 48 hours notice of the excavation. The excavation damaged the gas pipeline, but the excavator did not notify the gas company about the damage. Instead, the excavator attempted to repair the gas line himself. We filed suit and obtained default judgment, resulting in a $30,000 penalty and imposition of a permanent injunction against future violations. The final case against excavators involved multiple excavations in 2023 in Lynn County. The excavations involved drainage tile installation without providing 48 hours notice of the excavation. We had previously filed multiple lawsuits against the same excavator for other one-call violations, and the excavator paid $26,000 in combined civil penalties in the prior cases. For the 2023 excavations, while the excavator placed a locate request, they dug outside the area identified in the locate request and even continued digging after discovery and being told to stop by utility operators. One of the excavations even occurred within eyesight of an above-ground gas pipeline marker. We filed suit and the excavator agreed to a permanent injunction and paid a civil penalty of $17,500, resulting in almost $46,000 in civil penalties paid by this excavator for one-call violations. The final enforcement action taken by our office involves entering into an assurance of voluntary compliance agreement with utility operators Mid-American Energy Company, Mediacom, and CenturyLink, resolving a long-running investigation by our office into repeated violations of Iowa's one-call law. The violations including failing to timely locate underground facilities within the required 48-hour time period, improperly selecting agreed-to marking schedule when there was no such agreement, and not marking underground facilities accurately. Pursuant to the agreement, each company paid a $50,000 civil penalty for a total of $150,000 in civil penalties paid by the operators. Each company also has to submit monthly and annual reports to our office about their compliance with locating requirements. An important point when talking about the agreed-to marking schedule is the agreement must be mutual. Both the excavator and the utility operator need to agree to a marking schedule before such an agreement is registered in Iowa's one-call locate system. Complaints about potential violations of Iowa's one-call law may be submitted to the Attorney General's office or the Iowa Utilities Commission. Directions on how and where to file such complaints are provided on both the Attorney General and Utility Commission's websites. Our office has partnered with the Iowa Utilities Commission to investigate one-call complaints. The Commission will reach out to the parties and obtain additional information, documents, and photos. They will then prepare a summary and send it over to the Attorney General's office along with the investigative file. A final point our office wants to make is to help clarify what our office's role is under Iowa's one-call law and one of the limitations under that law. Under Iowa Code Chapter 480, our office is responsible for evaluating and determining whether a violation of Iowa's one-call law has occurred under Chapter 480. We are not responsible for, nor can we provide any advice about whether someone is liable for damages to an underground facility. That is a separate legal issue, and those questions should be asked to your own legal counsel or insurance agency. In closing, when followed, the one-call law saves lives, prevents personal injuries, and protects essential utilities, property, and the environment. We trust that most of you attending this important program are familiar with the one call law and fully comply. Our only hope is that these brief comments will serve as a reminder to everyone of the importance of this law and the potential consequences when the law is violated. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. The Iowa Attorney General's office takes matters very seriously with compliance issues, regardless of whether it's excavators or locators. And in fact, Jake Larson, who you saw there, told me that their office encourages excavators to report compliancy issues with locators and operators. And if you want to make those complaints filed, you would go to the Iowa Attorney General's website. The easiest thing to do, obviously, nowadays is simply Google it or ask Siri to connect you with the AG's office. Their homepage, this is a screenshot of their homepage. You'll see down in the right-hand corner the Iowa One Call tab. You'll click on that, and then you'll be taken to the homepage there with the One Call complaint form. And if you click on that, you'll probably be taken to the Utilities Commission if you have a complaint against a locator, and then just follow the process. Again, if you have issues and don't report it, nothing's going to be done about it. Okay, so that concludes the actual presentation, and there were some warts. That's what happens when we do it live. Thank you for bearing with me through that. We have now gotten to the Q&A section, and the way we're going to do this is with a show of hands, and then you'll text your question in. I'm going to turn it over to Rick, and he can explain just how you do that. We'll try to get to as many questions as we can. Thank you.
Yeah, so all of this is pretty straightforward again. So the chat feature for this is going to be disabled. However, there is a Q&A little tab at the bottom. As you see it, it'll be the straight in the middle of your screen at the bottom. You just click on the button. It'll take you to a little window where you can type in your question. We're going to answer questions. We're probably going to get inundated with a lot. So we're going to try to get to as many as we can. If we don't get to your question, we will have a log of them and we'll try to reach out to you individually. If we don't get to your question and we don't email you, please reach out to us if you feel like you really want an answer to your question.
Thank you. All right, so this is the part where we wait, and we'll just keep this screen up. There's a help desk number there, which is very helpful, the 563-884-7762. That's directly to the center, the notification center. You can also email Rick or myself. We've already got questions coming in, so we're going to, I guess, take these as they come in. You got something for me, Rick?
Yeah, so question number one, what are the requirements for potholing to verify depth of utilities?
Okay, it looks like there's a two-parter there. What's the bottom part there?
What if I know I'm not going to excavate very deep? Is it still necessary to pothole?
Okay, good. So, okay, we're talking about mandatory potholing or verifying where the facility is. The code actually says, the code meaning the Iowa One Call Law, Chapter 480, if, and this is important, if, in the opinion of the operator. So if the operator, the utility, if it's in their opinion, they probably got to tell you it's in their opinion. If in the opinion of the operator, the planned excavation requires that the precise location of an underground facility be determined, then the excavator, unless otherwise agreed between the excavator and the operator, shall hand dig test holes or use non-destructive methods to determine the location of the facility. So really, if the operator wants you to verify where their facilities are, then under this statute, you have to comply. And that would be down to the depth of wherever that facility is. And you could use these non-destructive methods, which would be something like hydrovacking or wet vac, hydrovac, dry vac. What was it? Oh, no, what if I know I'm not going to excavate very deep? Is it still necessary to pothole? Well, again, the same law is true. If in the opinion of the operator, the precise location be determined, then yes, you would need to comply by hand digging or potholing with non-destructive means. What else you got? Anything? Oh, lots of them are coming in.
Yeah. So did they change, or excuse me, did they change the emergency locate response time to 48 hours?
No, well, okay. The emergency response time, there never was a mandatory time of response. The 48-hour period is the only required response time in Iowa Code Chapter 480. Now, I know some of you are thinking, well, what about the 2 hour response time for emergencies? The 2 hour response time is an industry standard that many states use because obviously there's an emergency and it's more important, I guess, than a normal locate. But the only thing it says in the code is that if an emergency exists, and that is, by the way, when a clear and immediate danger to life or health or essential services or a significant loss of property exists, then the excavation can commence immediately without a notice to Iowa One call. Although it does say in the same code, provided that Iowa One call is contacted as soon as practical thereafter. Okay, that's lengthy. I hope that makes sense. We
Oh,
certainly encourage, and most of the, if not all operators do practice that 2 hour response time whenever practical.
okay. So the next question we have is what is the wait time for a joint meet?
Well, joint meets are scheduled. So when you're setting a joint meet, so you're the excavator and you want to schedule a joint meet, you'll go into the electronic online system to schedule your joint meet, and you'll actually select a time. And then that's just like an appointment. So whatever the appointment is on that. So you'll know in advance. You'll know what your meet time is. If the operator fails to meet with you at that time, I certainly recommend that you do a non-response or call back in.
All right. Next question, can locators give depths on utilities now?
Well, can they? Yes, they certainly can. Are they required to by law? No, they are not required to by law. That part of the section did not change. The new equipment that we have nowadays, the receiving transmitters and receivers, they're really high tech, and I think they do get a pretty good reading on depth. But because the operators are not required by law to provide depth, it'd be upon them whether they wanted to provide that or not. Nothing changed in the code.
All right. Next question. The pipeline rule only applies if the line is 150 psi and or 2. Um,
Inches or larger. Yes, it used to be, some of you may be familiar, that standby used to apply to natural gas transmission pipelines. And they changed the part natural gas transmission pipelines to any underground pipeline operating at 150 pounds per square inch or greater and at 2 inches or greater. So yes, if it meets any of that criteria, there is mandatory. But again, if you're the excavator, remember, it's the operator of the pipeline. It's incumbent upon them to reach out to you to let you know that and then to coordinate that meeting.
when you call in an emergency locate, how long do you need to wait for the locate to be completed?
Okay, when you call in an emergency, again, locates are not required for an emergency, but the emergency has to meet the definition under the law, which is a clear and immediate danger to life or health or essential services or a significant loss of property. If it meets that criteria, excavation can begin immediately, provided the excavator notifies Iowa One call as soon as practical. But let's look at that situation. Excavating without locates could make a situation even worse. For example, if you've got blowing gas and you excavate and hit an electric line, that could be a catastrophe. So, we advise that you use precaution and err on the side of caution, and whenever practical, wait for your locate markings. But that's up to the excavator and the circumstances. We do have at Iowa One called the process where we put down the 2 hour response time. And as I said, most operators, they do abide by that 2 hour recommended best practice. I hope I answered the question. There's just nothing in the code that specifies a response time for emergencies. The emergency excavation could begin immediately. It's better to have the locate marking so you wait. But if it's an emergency, the people involved in that emergency, you're gonna determine what needs to be done.
Okay, next question.
Determinate, is that a word?
I'm not sure.
The determinator.
We'll go with it. Can locators deny to locate a ditch due to length of grass in the road ditch?
No, they cannot. There's no statutory exception for that. You know, a lot of people might think there should be statutory exceptions for a lot of things. The code was written prior to 93. It was written back in the early 90s, and there really are very few statutory exceptions. Now, these things do happen. Ditches do get overgrown, and sometimes there are access issues. Even though there are very real access issues that do exist, they are not statutory exceptions for not completing the locate within 48 hours. In a case like this, though, it makes sense that the locator would reach out and try to make alternative arrangements with an excavator by explaining the situation. And hopefully people will work together to come to a mutual agreement somehow to alleviate those types of situations. But the short of the answer is no, a locator cannot deny to locate the ditch. They would call and ask if there could be arrangements to make sure that the ditch was mowed down or something, or provide extra time. But again, it is not up to the excavator to have to mow that ditch.
Next question. What is my liability for unmarked utilities after waiting the correct amount of time? I show up and the area is not marked.
All right, now it's important. The word here, liabilities. Hopefully you just listened to Jake Larson at the AG's office. And in that video clip, you heard Mr. Larson say that the Attorney General's office, and by the way, the AG's office is the only enforcement agent on Iowa Code 480. And they will determine compliance, whether that code was, the operator or the excavator is in compliance with that code, or if they're breaking that law. But they, the Attorney General's office, do not determine liability. So we don't really deal with liability. We deal with compliance. Okay, so I can't give you a definitive. However, it's very likely that if there's a non-compliance, such as an unmarked utility when they were supposed to be marked, there's a very good possibility that the liability is going to be in favor of the excavator. But in order to determine that for sure, you'd want to talk to your own lawyers or liability experts.
There we go. When calling in a joint meet, is the new 48-hour rule used for this? For example, if I call in for a joint meet on Monday, would the first available date for the meet be on Wednesday or Thursday?
Yes, and again, that's how the center is processing information. So that would be the case. Everything is backed up now where the day of the notice does not count. So the available dates would not be obviously available for a joint date until the 48 hours. I hope I answered that. What's this one? Okay, if a general contractor has a valid locate ticket, but one of the subcontractors fails to obtain a locate ticket and a damaged line occurs, who is responsible? Oh, that's a good question. Again, that's kind of like a liability thing. Let me just say this. In terms of compliancy, the person doing the excavation is required to have a notice. Now, a person could be a legal entity. So if ABC Contracting has 20 employees and ABC Contracting has a dig ticket, those legal 20 employees of ABC Contracting can operate on that ticket. But a subcontractor, like Ricky Bennett Subcontracting, if I hire you, Rick, you can't use my ticket. So that subcontractor would have to have their own ticket. So in this scenario, the question is, what if the subcontractor, who's not a legal entity, hits something and doesn't have a ticket? Well, they're non-compliant with the law then, okay? Remember, we don't determine liability, but there's a pretty good chance the people that do determine liability would certainly want to look at whether there was a compliancy issue. And, you know, when they're determining liability, Rick, if you were non-compliant and didn't have the notice, chances are the old liability folks are going to say, well, you're liable. But we don't make that determination. I hope that counts. We got a lot of questions. I know people want to get to the prize drawings. What time do we have? Oh, we're right at an hour. We said we go about an hour, but we got a lot of questions. I like this. Let's try to get a few more. I really like these questions. What do we have here?
Let's see. Um,
Let's see, will the presentation be available? Yeah, we'll certainly make this presentation available. Once we get it recorded, we'll put it up on the website. We'll have a link, and you can also email Rick and me. Our emails are still up.
yeah,
And make sure if you do want a copy, we'll get
yeah.
this sent to you.
Feel
Absolutely.
feel free to reach out to me. I'm gonna look into having the presentation sent out via your email signed up with for the webinar, and then yeah.
All right. Let's see. What else do we have? How long does an excavator have to wait for the pipeline representative to show up when the excavation will occur within 25 feet of the pipeline? Oh, that's a great question. They really listened. They worded that great. Okay. How long do they have to wait? Well, remember, the operator of the pipeline must contact the excavator within the 48-hour period and then schedule an appointment. Now, that the excavator may agree to meet after the 48 hours, but that's up to the excavator. But once there's an appointment made, it's actually a timed appointment, say 9 o'clock next Wednesday. Well, you know, how long do you have to wait? Well, if they don't show up at 9 o'clock, they have not complied. You may want to, you know, give some reasonable, you know, I guess, wait 5 or 10 minutes or maybe call them. But again, the law states that you have to wait or at least make an appointment. That's what it says. There needs to be a standby. The operator of the pipeline will make that. And then if that operator fails to show up at that time, then the excavation can begin. So again, I know I'm talking a lot here. How long do you have to wait for the representative to show up? Well, if they don't make the time that they've stipulated and you've agreed upon, then you don't really have to wait beyond that point. Because you're dealing with pipelines, however, and with the potential hazards, we would certainly hope that you'd use good common sense and judgment. You know what? Here's the plug we wanted to talk about. The 2026 Excavation Safety Awareness Summit. We realize that if you're way far away in the state, it's difficult to get down to Des Moines. But if you can make this all-day event, we even have blocked hotel rooms. It's a well worthwhile. We have keynote speakers with lots of equipment sponsors and exhibitors. We put on a good program. We feed you breakfast and lunch, and we have some really, really great prizes and some opportunities to win some cash too with some games. But we hope to see you there. But we'll do these Zoom meetings as well as a supplement. With that, I want to thank everyone. The most important thing is excavation safety. It's your safety. It's the communities where you work, their safety. Everyone needs to get home safe. Thank you. Have a very productive rest of your 2025. Thanks again. Dig safe.